Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is Aaron Tomlinson, and I want to do a video. Thought it would be fun to do on this channel for subscribers and viewers, a video on why I am not an atheist. I've been involved for many years with movement of Christian deconstruction. If you followed this channel, watched any of the videos on this channel, then I think you understand what I'm talking about when I say Christian deconstruction. It's a bit of a philosophical misnomer, but it's an accurate adjective. When I'm talking about Christian deconstruction, I'm talking about people who deconstruct from the faith that they once held, in this case, the Christian faith. If this is the first time you've watched one of my videos, then just to let you know, I was raised in a Christian family. I became radically saved at the age of 18 and just took off spreading the good news and was involved in ministry. I was a founder and senior pastor of a church for many years, decades actually. And then somewhere in my 40s, I just began to question everything about my faith. And I began to look into biblical scholarship. I began to look into ideas, other types of spiritualities, other religious ideas, other scientific ideas. And through a rather lengthy process that also involved some what I would call transcendent or mystical or supernatural experiences, I deconstructed from my Christian faith completely and no longer pastoring a traditional Christian church in any way, shape, or form. And through this process, I made a lot of relationships. I met a lot of people. I emphasized for a significant number of years, the last few years, putting forth this idea that religion can cause trauma and that many of us are suffering from religious trauma and have symptoms of religious trauma and don't even know it because we didn't have a word for it or an understanding of it. And through that process, through watching people go through this same kind of deconstruction process, through watching them address their own personal trauma and difficulty that they had from their religious experiences in church, and some of them were truly, truly horrific stories, people out there that experienced much, much, much more severe religious trauma or experiences that would cause religious trauma than what I experienced. But through this process, I watched as many of my friends and many of the people that I talked to or coached would invariably end up in atheism, just full-on atheism. And I'm going to define that a little bit better and a little bit more in this video and talk about why I haven't been able to do that. Now, again, if you've watched some of my other videos, I've been very clear that I could never really fully embrace atheism at all, not even for a day, really, because I had too many experiences, spiritual experiences, signs and wonders, miracles, things of this nature, things that could not be explained through the laws of physics, let's put it that way, or through our current understanding of the laws of physics. And I'll get into that in a little bit as well. And one of the things that I did in religion was that I allowed myself to be indoctrinated. And through that indoctrination process, I had to give up parts of myself. In fact, we're even taught to do that in the Christian faith. There are verses in the Bible where Jesus says, unless you deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Unless you lose your soul for my sake, you cannot be saved. And the word for deny yourself there, literally in the Greek, is a word that means to disown yourself. You have to disown yourself, make yourself completely dependent upon the lordship of Christ. And that lordship is communicated through the mediumship of the Holy Scriptures, of the Bible. And so we want to take our leadings from the Bible. So the Bible is the absolute source of our faith and the rule of our conduct. And we're not really encouraged or even allowed to have experiences that go outside of those parameters or to question things that may not be addressed by the Bible. Now, a lot of people in this modern world realize that when we're dealing with the Scriptures, regardless of what you think about it, whether you think it's inspired by God, whether you think it's inherently the Word of God, or whether you think it's been a bunch of stories that were put together and plagiarized from other cultures, or whether you think it has no value at all, The point is that a lot of people that maintain their faith understand, or any of those camps that I talked about, have any of those thought processes about the Bible, understand that it's an antiquated book, meaning it's ancient. It comes out of ancient cultures. It comes out of ancient worldviews. And so therefore, we can't expect the Bible to be fully accurate or fully correspond or correlate to our understanding of the world. And so a lot of people blend the two. They try to blend science and spirituality, or they try to take pieces of science and they try to take pieces of religion and sort of sew this mental tapestry out of which then they can live their lives. So naturally, what happens for a lot of people is that when they begin to realize the harm and the hurt and the dangers of toxic religion, and I'm speaking specifically about very fundamentalist, controlling forms of religion where you have no autonomy. You disown yourself completely and give yourself up to the lordship of Christ, or to the obedience to scriptures, or faithfulness to the church or your church tradition. Then invariably you have to shelve parts of yourself, right? Now, other people are able to, I suppose, shelve parts of themselves and then maintain a certain level of autonomy in their thinking, and then they're able to blend sort of these worldviews together. But for a lot of people, when they're coming out of religion and they're realizing the harm that's being done, they completely extricate the religious elements from their mental tapestry of life, the way they understand life, the way they experience life, the way that they think about life. And so what happens, because it's the predominant worldview in our culture and has been for the last 150 years, is that people will oftentimes shift then completely into scientific materialism, because scientific materialism in and of itself is a system of thought. It's actually a philosophy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's a system of thought that murders God, that gets rid of God altogether. And in the process, though, it also discounts and reduces down any paranormal or supernatural experience, and it leaves no room whatsoever for spirituality. So people who may have been pursuing their Christian faith because they were trying to answer some of the deeper questions about life, they were pursuing and cultivating that spiritual side to humanity that has always been there in every culture around the world, as far back as we can study in anthropology, and I believe will always be there. I believe it's an intricate part of who we are. I don't think we know who we are. I don't think we fully understand where we are. I don't think we fully understand the nature of the universe. And so in a certain sense, I guess I can call myself agnostic, because I'm saying I don't know. Agnosticism comes from the word Gnosticism in the Greek, which means to know by experience. You don't know it because someone else told you about it. You know it because you experienced it yourself. So on the one hand, I could never let go of I could never fully embrace atheism, because it would require me to do the same thing that I felt like I did when I got into religion that got me into trouble, and that was to disown and deny my own experiences. And so I have a whole, again, tapestry of mystical experiences that happen to me directly, direct experiences with the numinous, direct experiences with that which cannot be explained. So I don't need to take someone else's word for it. I don't need to look at how people out there have debunked psychic phenomena, or they've debunked seances, or they've debunked basically what amounts to probably charlatanism out there in the spiritual and mystical fields, because I'm not taking anybody's word for it. I'm going off of what I've directly experienced. So that would be Gnosticism. So on the one hand, I'm saying I can't fully embrace atheism because I'm Gnostic, but then on the other hand, I'm willing to become agnostic in the sense that I don't think that scientific materialism is a very accurate or complete way of viewing the world. That doesn't mean that I don't think science is important. That doesn't mean that I just want to throw out science and not benefit from science or even think scientifically in certain ways. It just means that science itself is contained within a larger paradigm of scientific materialism. So this is where I want to get into the philosophy aspect of it. While most people are not aware of this, science itself, modern science as we know it, grew out of a metaphysical philosophy that was called materialism, that can trace its roots all the way back to ancient Greece and perhaps before. I don't want to get into the weeds with it and bore you by talking about various different aspects of materialism and the philosophers who gave us the philosophy and the concepts of materialism. And I certainly don't want to go into how it became the predominant view in the 19th, sort of 20th century. But there was a huge paradigm shift in the West in the 19th and 20th centuries away from a school of philosophy, that's the word I'm looking for, a school of philosophy that was called realism, or that is called realism. Realism was the dominant philosophical framework out of which Western civilization grew. And then within the last 200 years, last 150 years, there's been a major shift in the West to where now materialism has become the dominant philosophical worldview. And out of materialism, then, the modern scientific method has grown, and we've certainly benefited from that. But what a lot of people won't tell you, or a lot of people aren't aware of, is that while they want to claim that they have found the truth by embracing this sort of materialistic atheism, or atheism at all, which also fits within the framework of materialism, what they don't want to tell you is that they're working within a metaphysical framework. They're working within a metaphysical philosophical framework. So I want to define a little bit what materialism is and what idealism is, and then I want to go into why I have some problems with scientific materialism, because that's the biggest reason that I'm not an atheist. So let's talk about what philosophy is. Philosophy is not just the love of wisdom or the love of knowledge. Philosophy is not just a course that you take where you learn about these great thinkers and how they thought about different situations in our life. If you look at the definition of philosophy, the study of philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of reality. I want to say that again. It's the study of the fundamental nature of reality. In other words, it's the largest governing paradigm that we have. So however you view life, however you think about life, however you interact with life, your philosophy is your fundamental beliefs about the nature of reality that create the overarching paradigm through which you experience everything. A paradigm is a fundamental way of seeing the world. And so philosophy really then is the study of paradigms, or it's the study of how we fundamentally perceive the world. So we're dealing with perceptions and the way that thoughts and the way that ideas fundamentally govern our perceptions and therefore override the way that we think. So if you're coming from a paradigm of materialism, you will fit everything, every experience that you have or that you hear about will have to go inside that paradigm of materialism. On the other hand, if you're operating from a philosophy of idealism, then you're going to fit everything into an idealistic framework. Or if you're operating out of some other foundational philosophical opinion. But the interesting thing about philosophy is that most of us don't choose our philosophies. Most of us are subconsciously indoctrinated or unconsciously indoctrinated into philosophies based on the culture that is around us. In other words, our worldview, our lenses through which we view reality are given to us. They're the byproduct of our culture. So we're talking about a huge sort of collective mindset, a collective fundamental view of reality. And so we're living in a culture today where science is the fundamental view of reality, and not science, scientific materialism, because there is a difference, but you'll see how they go together. So what is materialism? The philosophy of materialism says that the fundamental or essential nature of reality is matter. M-A-T-T-E-R. It's the matter that matters. And it's easy to see how this way of thinking is almost intuitive in many ways, because the way that scientific materialism postulates reality or talks about reality is that it says that the stuff out there, everything out there, consists of matter, and there is nothing else. Now, this is materialism. Now, you can nuance this, and people have, and say, well, no, everything consists of energy, and energy is matter, but basically what we're saying is everything consists of these particles, these atoms, these protons, these neutrons, or these fields that exist out there that are quantifiable, they are measurable, and they exist or organize themselves around a set of laws. And so everything that exists outside of our minds, we are just the observers. We're the observers of a reality that is quantifiable and measurable. In other words, everything has mathematical properties to it. And if everything has mathematical properties to it and it's organized, then there are certain laws of physics, there are certain laws of nature and laws of reality around which everything is organized. So if someone like myself comes along and talks to someone who's open-minded, but they have embraced as their fundamental way of seeing reality, materialism, that everything out there is matter, everything out there is measurable, everything out there is quantifiable, and then out of that comes the scientific method where it's measurable, it's quantifiable, and it is repeatable. Because it's measurable, because it's quantifiable, because it is repeatable, because it's measurable, because it's quantifiable, because it's observable, then when we understand how it works, we understand the laws that govern it, then it becomes repeatable. So if there are things that we don't understand about our experience, if someone comes along and has let's say, a telepathic intuition or a telepathic communication, or has an intuition, or there's a miracle, a spontaneous remission that comes about by belief, then these things are just things that we haven't discovered yet. But that does not change the fact or the belief that the fundamental nature of reality exists in measurable, observable quantities. So our brains, so what about our brains? What about our thoughts and our thinking? Well, that is something that exists other than. So in other words, I'm the observer, I'm perceiving what's out there, and I'm seeking to understand what's out there. And the only thing that's out there is measurable and observable and quantifiable. In other words, it has weight, it has location in time and space, it has measure, it has all these things. Then we can use all of basically math as the fundamental way to explain and progress through our interaction with reality. Now, the problem is that materialism only deals with quantities. It does not address qualities. Science addresses the process of things, how these things out there interact, what causes what. If we find the right laws of cause and effect, and we manipulate those or work with those in the correct way, then we can always have a repeatable conclusion. And so this is the argument against like spontaneous healing or divine healing or faith healing or whatever you want to call it, that if you experience a supernatural event like a healing, if you experience a supernatural event like what we would call an answer to prayer or a synchronicity, then there are laws or causes that govern that we just fully don't comprehend yet. But once we can fully comprehend them, then we'll know the causes and they can be repeatable. And so they'll say, I don't believe in those things, or I don't like those things, or I'm going to diminish or reduce down those things, because for the people who did get healed in a healing service or a miracle service, there was this group over here that didn't get healed in a healing service or a miracle service. See where I'm going with that? So yeah, there's something that caused it over here, but it's not repeatable. So therefore, it's not fundamental, and therefore it's not a foundation upon which I'm sorry, with my paradigm in materialism, I can't take that seriously enough to really do anything with it. And so I don't remain agnostic. I don't remain open to the question. Agnostic means to be without knowledge. I don't think I fully define that. I apologize for that. I'm not going to go back and edit the video, but I hope you're tracking with me. I hope you're staying with me on this. So that's the essence of materialism. Now, again, materialism deals with quantity. It does not deal with quality. Here's what I mean. If I eat a strawberry and I have the experience of tasting a strawberry, that is a quality that I experience, and it's not observable or measurable in the sense that we're talking about. Now, sure, I can eat a strawberry and I can really enjoy that, and someone can observe that, or I can observe or experience or perceive, is a better way to say it, the taste of a strawberry, and the strawberry tastes the same every time I eat a strawberry. But I don't really know that the way I experience a strawberry, the flavor of it, is exactly the way you experience the flavor of it. If somehow we could swap, like in for one day, and I could be me, I'm sorry, I could be me. You could be me and I could be you, then we might find out that we experience the taste of strawberry completely differently. Or what about qualities like falling in love? Or what about qualities like regret and bitterness? These are things that exist in consciousness. These are things that cannot be measurable and quantifiable, even if they are repeatable. So what am I saying? I'm saying we have the problem of consciousness. We have the problem of mind. Now, for a materialist, it's not a problem at all, because they can look at the activity in the brain. They can look at how brain damage affects perceptual experience. And they can say, well, consciousness is simply the byproduct of the activity that's going on in the brain. So again, we're back to matter. We're back to energy. We're back to measurable, quantifiable things that can be understood, right? And so the experience of tasting an apple or eating a strawberry or falling in love is simply the result of some activity in the brain, even though every neuroscience, even the materialists, will admit that there's not even a hypothesis for how that works. And there's not one shred of laboratory evidence or mathematical models that explains qualities, because it can't explain qualities, because it's only there to explain quantities. And when we talk about flavor, and we talk about taste, and we talk about love, and we talk about inspiration, and we talk about these things, then what we're talking about are qualities. We're talking about qualities, not quantities. Now, the real problem that materialists have is that all of the progress in quantum physics is undermining and overturning and overthrowing materialism as a philosophy. In other words, through the study of quantum mechanics, at least as I understand it, not a quantum physicist, but I can read people who are, and I can understand what they're saying. I don't know how they arrive at those conclusions, but I can trust that they are trustworthy conclusions, and then I can listen to those conclusions. And so here's what I know about experiments. You want to use the scientific method, experiments that have been repeated in regards to quantum physics, or how matter operates and exists at a microscopic level. And so one conclusion that nearly all quantum physicists that I've listened to, or if I even read a basic book on quantum physics, is in the introductory material to quantum physics, is that matter does not exist out there like we have thought matter exists at all, in that it is not local and it is not quantifiable. It is not measurable. Well, now, wait a minute, Aaron, because they've measured things like atoms and protons and particles and things like that. Yeah, but here's the thing about quantum physics. What they know about the nature of those particles is that they only become particles. They only come into being as particles when they are measured. So the old paradigm of materialism said that everything exists out there. We're just the observers, and we have to discover what's out there. So the thing exists as it is, as a particle, and when we measure it, we are only perceiving in somewhat of an abstract way, albeit, but we are only perceiving what was out there that we measured. So the thing in its quantifiable existence exists independently of the measurement. And then we come along after the fact and measure it, and then we know what it is. We're able to talk about it. We're able to identify it. But what quantum physics is telling us, and this is going to be a little bit crude, but I want to get it across. So I know this can be nuanced, but that's not the point of this video. But to be a little bit crude about it, what quantum physics is telling us is that actually the measurement comes first. So if you want to take it from cause and effect, it exists out there and I just come along and measure it. But what quantum physics is telling us is that it's the measurement itself that causes it to solidify as matter, as something that's quantifiable in and of itself to begin with. So it's not out there and the measurement comes second. It's the measurement comes and then it comes into being out there. And this completely undermines scientific materialism, or it completely undermines materialism as a belief system. And there's more and more evidence and more cutting edge science that is slowly eating away at materialism as a philosophy. So before we become so certain that we just haven't discovered everything out there, we judge every phenomenon based on this paradigm of materialism and say we just haven't discovered the laws that govern that yet. Oh yeah, let's come back to laws for a second. Laws are a metaphor. It's a human metaphor that we use. There are not really laws of physics. There are not really laws of the universe like laws. Law is a judicial term. It has to do with civilized societies and how they're governed and how they're organized. And it's a metaphor. It's an anthropomorphic metaphor that we project onto the universe in order to create a mental map whereby we can understand it. It's not that much different than what we did in religion with God. We took all these qualities of ourselves and projected them out into this being in the sky and made God anthropomorphic, but we do the same thing in some ways with the explanation of science. But people that are over here will condemn people that are in the religious space when they're doing the same thing. They're just not doing it with a deity. They're doing it with the nature of reality. They're anthropomorphizing it. So that's some of the problems. one of the real problems that I have is that I see so many similarities, and this is the biggest thing. I see so many similarities between scientific materialism and religion. Let me explain what I mean. If, as I was saying earlier, it is true that God exists and that God gave us the Bible as our guidebook for life, as the source of our faith and the rule of our conduct, that is a presupposition. That is a presupposition. That is a philosophy. That is a fundamental belief about the nature of reality. And so what happens is I do circular reasoning. So I can say, well, I know the Bible is the Word of God because the Bible says it's the Word of God. I know the Bible is inspired because the Bible says that it's inspired. So I keep coming back to my paradigm. I can't not do it. I keep coming back to the fundamental principle of reality to explain why I believe it's the fundamental principle of reality. The same thing happens with materialism. I know that what you experienced has some material scientific explanation, because I know that scientific materialism is the fundamental nature of reality. It's the same circular reasoning. So the same psychic or psychological human processes of projection that went on with religion are the same psychological processes that go on in projection with scientific materialism and atheism. It's the same thing. In a lot of ways, it really is the same thing. Now, here's what's interesting. For most of our time on this planet, and this is true both in the East and in the West, materialism has not been the governing paradigm. And that's why we see so much scientific progress in the last 200 years that we didn't see before. So that science, the philosophy of materialism with the instrument of science, which grew out of that, has become the new Enlightenment. Look how much better our lives are. Look how much we've advanced, we've moved society forward. We've improved people's lives with medicine, with conveniences, with heat, with shelter, with food, all these things that science has given to us because we've embraced materialism. And so that becomes our fundamental philosophy. And it's easy to point to and say, look, we're in an age of scientific enlightenment. But prior to materialism taking over as the predominant philosophy in the Western world, what existed prior to that was idealism. Now, idealism says that mind or consciousness or thought is the fundamental nature of reality. Now, this is really important, because idealism is not saying that consciousness is an aspect of reality that we can understand using materialism. What it's saying is that something that I already said can't be quantified, because it's not about quantity, it's about quality, is the fundamental nature of our universe. It is the fundamental nature of our reality. And so idealism says mind is fundamental. Materialism says matter is fundamental, and the two are completely incompatible as paradigms and as systems. So we can think about it this way. We can think about idealism as a part of our garden or a part of our yard that for many, many years, centuries, was cultivated. That's the ground, the fundamental principle, that mind is fundamental to reality. And so therefore God or logos or consciousness is fundamental to reality. And so what we plant in that garden is going to spring up. And it gave us things like Christianity. In the East, it gave us things like Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism. In the West, it gave us Christianity, it gave us Judaism, it gave us Islam, but it also gave us all the offshoots of that, the New Thought movement, the New Age movement, these concepts of mind over matter, or the law of attraction. All of things, these are the crops that you get from the ground of idealism. Now, a lot of people want to look at that and say, well, religion is just weeds. It's not just weeds. Religion is a very unsatisfying crop. Religion has done nothing to nourish and feed humanity. Religion did nothing to progress humanity forward. In fact, look at all the problems we have today because of religion. Once the harvest of it fully came up, we can say, okay, we can identify all the problems that were with it. So then in the last 200 years, we went to a different plot of ground. And this plot of ground, this garden, is materialism. And so when we started cultivating materialism in humanity, it gave us scientific progression. It gave us science, scientific breakthroughs. It gave us technology. It gave us advancements. It gave us all these things. And we can sit here and say, look, aren't these things so much more wonderful that's coming out of this ground than what came out of this ground? However, those are also presuppositions, because number one, maybe what's in the ground of materialism, since it's only 200 years old, hasn't fully given us the full harvest yet. Maybe we need to look at how technology is damaging our environment. Maybe we need to look at how materialism has damaged our relationships with one another, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we relate to one another. Maybe we're starting to see some of the negative fruit or some of the bad fruit that's coming out of that ground. It just hasn't come into full fruition yet. It hasn't come into full harvest yet, like this ground over here. And maybe, just maybe, religion, maybe idealism isn't wrong. Maybe we just planted some wrong seeds, or maybe we just got some weeds in there. In other words, what I'm willing to say is that for me, Christianity, based on my understanding and my experience, was a noxious weed that came out of the ground of idealism, but that doesn't mean that I'm ready to leave the plot altogether. I'm ready to leave the plot altogether, or that I'm ready to leave that part of the garden altogether and come over here and get into this garden, because this garden, this framework, this philosophy does not work to explain my experiences. In fact, it tries to shove my experiences into its paradigm because it has to, because if materialism is fundamental, then my experiences have to be explained materialistically, but they can't be. And the last thing I want to address is this idea of laws, because I brought it up earlier and I'm going to have to rush through this. Maybe I'll come back and do a whole video on this. But Rupert Sheldrake challenges the idea that there are laws in nature, and he's got lots of great science, observable, measurable, and repeatable things to back him up. He thinks about the laws of the universe, not as laws, not as immutable, unchangeable things that we have to come into harmony with. He thinks about them as habits, that nature has habitually done things a certain way for so long that it's an ingrained habit. That leads us back to idealism, because habits are the byproduct of our mind, the byproduct of our mind and body. We can have mental habits, we can have physical habits. And so what if these aren't laws? What if these are habits? What if these are habits of a more collective mind that is organizing the universe, but not organizing it according to immutable laws, but according to habits? Well, then habits don't always have to be repeatable. Habits don't always have to be repeatable. Habits can be circumvented. Habits can be broken. And so under this paradigm of habits, which comes out of idealism, it provides a better explanation for why we're able to break the habits of our universe and our perception of the universe and have what we call supernatural experiences and paranormal experiences, but they're not as repeatable because they haven't become collective habits in the collective unconscious yet, or in the consciousness of the universe yet, so that they are as repeatable and as sustainable and as these other habits that we see when we're talking about the laws or the habits of the universe. So I hope you found this helpful. I'd love to see the comments on this, but that's my explanation for why I'm not an atheist. If you like this content, I'm going to do more on this, as well as I'm really getting excited because now that I've really kind of settled this issue of atheism and materialism, and I understand the underpinnings of it, and I realize that I gravitate more towards the idealism paradigm, that gives me freedom to create the kind of content that I want to create within that structure and within that paradigm. So if you like this, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification buttons, you know the deal, so that you'll get new content when it comes out. Those of you that have been supporting us through our PayPal, I really appreciate that. I've got a PayPal link at the bottom of here of this video. That helps me to continue to put this content out. Still working my day job, but gradually getting better at being more consistent with producing content. Thank you if you watched this all the way to the end. I appreciate it. Look forward to reading your comments, and I will see you in the next video.